Okay, so doing this in English for the first time, so bear with me. I would like this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to interrupt me at any time, and we can create a conversation about whatever I'm talking about, just to make sure everybody understands what it is that I'm saying. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I'm Nick. I've been writing software for 20 years. I started coding professionally at 16. I spent 9 years in Silicon Valley, where I worked for Apple, among others, and mostly worked for startups. And I'm the founder of Gembani, a company whose role it is to improve the lives of developers. And we do that by working on management, on technical practices, and on tooling. Just training various people in organizations to just produce better software, higher quality, faster, with less friction. So, as part of my role, I've been doing office hours with founders and CTOs for maybe like 5 years now. So I've met with hundreds of CTOs, hundreds of CEOs, and over the course of that time, you realize that a lot of the mistakes that are made are basically the same mistakes. And so I've identified 4 kind of categories of mistakes that are made, and we will discuss them. Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is, how do you know for sure what is going to be the idea product, the perfect product? How do we know that? You don't know what the perfect product is, and it's over time with iteration that we discover what the product that we need to build is. Does everybody kind of agree with that?
Yeah.
So the next question is, when is the worst possible time to decide what the product is going to be?
At the end of the implementation of the product. The worst?
No, well, if you decide at the end, you know
When you launch.
when you launch. Well, I have a different answer. I have a different answer for that question. At the very beginning. Because you don't know. And the problem with working with an agency is that that's when you have to make all your decisions. You have to say, okay, I want this. How much is it going to cost me? Right? Yeah. So it's and so we feel like we're saving ourselves because there's a contract, right? But in reality, we're not. We're just ensuring that we're not going to get the product that we need.
Offer.
So if you go get quotations or proposals from agencies, you will have orders of magnitude in difference in price. Why? Some people will tell you it'll cost $100,000, other people will tell you it'll cost $30,000, some people will tell you it'll cost $5,000. Why is that? There's no answer like, oh, because some of them are lying to you. No, that's not what's happening. It's systemic, right? So we have to understand it better than that. Why is that? Yep.
I think it depends on like how many like projects they've done before, if they can copy paste what they've done before or not.
No, there's not that much copy pasting in code. It's you can use packages and gems, but that's a fair attempt, but no.
Maybe because they don't understand what you really want, actually. It's not clear.
But who doesn't understand? These guys, yes, or these guys?
No, both.
Probably 10K guys. For sure don't understand.
And so you're saying the 100K guys, they do?
Might.
Maybe, right? But there's quite of an uncertainty around that too, right? Well, this was another trick question because we don't know. Unfortunately, that's a reality of software development. We just don't know how long things are going to take. And because we don't know how long things are going to take, basically how do agencies work, right? They say, okay, this is going to take me 30 days. My daily rate is 500 a day. I'm going to multiply 500 by 30, and that's what I'm going to charge you, right? But the reality is, no one really knows how long things take. And so they are forced, so first of all, the agencies that are in trouble are forced to kind of reduce their bids in order to, it's kind of like a race to the bottom, right? But then they can never really honor it. in the sense that sure you have your contract that says, oh, you said you were gonna do this, and this for this amount of money. Generally, it doesn't happen. I've been working with startups for a long time. It's very rare for a startup that works with an agency to not end up with a bad relationship with the agency that they're working with. Like, it's very rare. So just to kind of recap, you have to define upfront, which is not what you want to do. What you really want to do is define daily. You want to define what you need today, every day. What brings value to my client today? And if you do it up front, then you're obviously going to do it wrong. Because we're all entrepreneurs, right? We all have these wonderful visions and ideas about what our product is going to be in 20 years. And that's great. That's part of being an entrepreneur. But in reality, we have to take that 20-year vision and break it down into today and talk about what I need today. And you should do that every day with an engineering team. First of all, you're not protected from the contract. You're just not. You can sue them. But do you really want to waste your time and resources suing them? You can threaten them. But really, you're not really protected. And ultimately, the agency will play ball for a while, but eventually their daily rate will be so low that they will have to stop. They will be losing money, right? Because if they estimated something take 30 days and it takes 90 days, they went from, their daily rate went from 500, which is sustainable in France, to a third of 500, which means they're actually losing money by working for you. So the only way really to build a startup is to develop it yourself. Either with a technician, work with a technician daily. And so you can use freelancers, that's okay. But you should talk about the priorities on a daily basis. Does that make sense? Because what will end up happening is on day one, you wanted something and you thought it was super cool, and he works on it for a day. And then at the end of the day, he's like, well, this is actually going to take a lot longer than we thought. This is going to take 5 or 6 days. And then you, as the entrepreneur, can be like, well, do I really need it that bad that it's okay for us to spend 5 days on this? And often the answer is no. So it allows us to create a feedback loop between engineering and product that is the only way to build software correctly. When you're starting up as an entrepreneur, well, you really want new clients, and what ends up happening is you want new clients, and so a client's like, oh, I need this. I'll buy your solution if you give me this feature, this feature, this feature. And so you, the struggling entrepreneur, goes to run to your engineering team and says, oh, I need these features tomorrow so I can sign a new client, right? And eventually what happens is that the entrepreneur has to, at first it's okay to do that, but the entrepreneur has to learn to kind of manage that in a different way. Because the cost of that is that the engineering team doesn't get better at their job. And so you have teams that have been working like that for 5-6 years that are still coding today the same way exactly that they were coding 5-6 years ago. And that's a problem. Right? As an engineering team grows, it needs to evolve in the way that it works, because that's how innovation is found. I won't read the quote, but this is a very common situation. CEO, in a rush all the time. He's signing a new client and he needs these other 2 features, and then of course he commits to when that feature is going to arrive without talking to his engineering team. And then when he comes back to his engineering team, his engineering team's like, well, you've overcommitted. We have 1 developer and you want me to work on 4 things at once. It can't work. Somebody's going to be unhappy. Innovation in a startup happens at multiple levels. It happens at the product level because you're innovating on the product level, but in order to be successful, that is not enough. You also need to be able to innovate in your processes and in your engineering processes. Because what ends up happening in 95% of the cases, and that's generally when I start intervening, is that after 2-3 years of working always the same way, the cost of a feature that would have cost you $100 on day one, 5 years later, that the cost of that feature is now $1,000. So what happens if your tech team is overrun? Like, what are some negative consequences to having to, always being under pressure as an engineer?
People leave.
People leave, absolutely. People leave, people go find another job. Anybody else?
Bad comments, bad quality.
Yeah, obviously bad quality code, which creates the technical debt, which means that your feature that costs you $500 on day 1 costs you $5,000 on day 25. Yeah, absolutely. So burnouts are quite common in engineering. People stop going to work. The team doesn't progress, which also causes burnout and departures, because an engineer that doesn't improve the way he works, he's not very happy. Obviously, the junior devs are never trained. Oftentimes, senior devs are so busy writing code that they don't have time to train the junior devs. And so you create kind of a vicious cycle. The juniors stay juniors. The seniors, sure, they stay seniors, but what happens when the senior's gone? If the senior leaves for the day, literally nothing gets done. Because the juniors aren't capable of doing anything on their own. So then what's the solution? The solution people make is eventually the code gets so crappy that people are like, okay, let's just start over. Let's start over. The problem with that is that it continues the cycle. First of all, the engineers don't understand the reasons what technically made the code so crappy they needed to rewrite it. And so you end up creating a vicious cycle, because if the CEO has accepted to give you 3 months to rewrite your whole application, you only have 3 months. And so what you end up doing is, at first, yes, you follow best practices for the first week or 2 or 3. And then by the end of the 3 months, you're writing just as crappy code as you were writing, before. So you haven't really solved the problem either. So generally what you want to do instead is you want to build in slack time into your process. It's okay for engineers not to have to be working on features on a daily basis. It's better if you have some off time. Some ritualized off time where you can work on continuous innovation and continuous improvement. There's a term from lean manufacturing called Kaizen. And the idea of Kaizen is to kind of improve the way you work just a tiny, tiny little step at a time. And so if you can build this sort of slack time in your process, you're more likely to have an engineering team that evolves and so that gets better at doing their job. If you tell the client, oh, that'll be ready in a week, and then you go tell your boss, I need this, or your developers, I need this by the end of the week, well, by definition, they will end up having to do a bad job. They won't have time to do it correctly. And so you're creating technical debt. So there are other ways of doing that, right? I mean, you can kind of measure the productivity of your team and assume that the productivity of your team on a specific time frame is going to continue to be the same. So let's say in week 1, you build 5 features. In week 2, you build 5 of similar complexity. You can assume that in week 3, you will build approximately 5 features. So you can kind of predict the speed of delivery, but you shouldn't impose it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, what's the root cause of our problem in our code base? Instead of saying, I'm going to spend 3 months solving it, spend a day every 2 weeks. That's the idea of Kaizen applied to software. 1 day every 2 weeks where everybody's like, hey, okay, what's frustrating about our code base right now? Okay, how do we fix it? Then you'll really identify the actual problems and you'll be able to solve them step by step. The problem is when things get so bad in the code base, engineers just don't want to do it anymore, right? They're just like, no, I just want to, I just want to start over. I want to start over with a brand new technology. But that's where we come in the sense that I don't want that to happen. It's very rare that I allow a big bang to happen. So, what do you guys know about Taylorism? Fordism? Nothing?
Conveyor.
What?
Conveyor.
Yeah, les temps modernes. The idea of Taylorism is to kind of separate each task to very specific tasks so that everybody can do it, quote unquote, faster. And that worked really well for Henry Ford. But to make it work, he had to simplify the automobile. At the time when Henry Ford was around, there were only luxury cars. What he did was say, no, in order to be able to scale the production of these vehicles, I need to simplify the vehicle. And in simplifying the vehicle, that allows you to kind of really separate the different jobs in the creation of a car. Just like in Les Temps Modernes. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that movie in English. The problem is that software isn't like building a simplified car. It's much more complicated than that. So for this, I kind of want to do a quick demo. So here is, let's say that a feature takes a UX designer 1 day, or one unit, it doesn't matter which. It takes a developer 3 days, and then it takes a QA, quality assurance, of people testing the application and verifying that it works, 2 days. And we have a dev, a UX, and a QA. 3 separate people. Let's see what happens. So what really is important in a startup is cycle time. It's from the moment we have an idea to the moment it's in production. That's what's important, because that's what allows us to have quick feedback from our customers, right? So we can validate our own ideas. So let's see what happens here. So as you can see, UX goes quick, right? And so what ends up happening is you end up having this massive bottleneck right in front of your dev team. And as you can see, your cycle time keeps increasing because of that bottleneck, right? So we can look at the average cycle time, right? That's keeping increasing, right? Because now the UX isn't doing anything anymore. And so let's see. So our cycle time is 214 days. So from the moment we have the idea to the moment where it's in production, that's basically a year, right? So how can we solve this problem? Any ideas? What can I do? Let's assume I have unlimited resources. What can I do?
Split the task into subtasks.
Okay, well, let's assume that they're already split into subtasks. Any ideas? Well, I can add people. Huh? Where should I add somebody? I should add a dev. Okay, right on. Let's do that. Boom. Let's see how that goes. So now it looks like we have 2 bottlenecks, in some sense. Okay, so here we've reduced it. We've reduced our cycle time by half, which is great. I like that. Hopefully if I add another dev, it'll reduce it again, right? Let's do it. Let's add another dev. What's happening now? The devs are going pretty fast now. But we have a new bottleneck at the QA level, right? So we've added 1 whole resource, so 1 full salaried employee, and our cycle time is basically the same. As you can see here, all resources are fully utilized, here as well, and here slightly less. Let me try something. Let me just limit the work in progress. In other words, limit the amount of tasks here all across the board, right? So that if there's too much stuff going on, the UX doesn't start on a new task, right? There's no point in the UX being like 6 months in advance on us anyway, right? You should do something else. There's no point, right? Because in 6 months when we're ready to dev, he'll have forgotten what it was that he was working on. So he'll have to context switch, get back into the subject. It's kind of a nightmare. So here's what we do. We'll limit the work in progress. We'll say 10. And I'm actually going to remove a dev. So there's less work in progress because we've limited it. We said we don't want it more than that. And as you can see, our cycle time is now a little bit more manageable, right? It's a quicker feedback loop. And as you can see, I've removed a dev. So, but there's one thing that's even better than this. Any ideas of how you can do this even better? Yeah?
No QA.
No QA? Yeah. Who needs products that work anyway, right?
Yeah, with automated test.
Okay, sure. So, but you're right. That's exactly where I'm going with this.
You need to release more often.
What?
Release more often.
Sure. So, let's just assume that an engineer is capable of learning all these skills. UX, development, and QA, thanks to all automatic testing. So let me just try something. Instead of having 4 people with all very separate jobs, like in Taylorism, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have 3 engineers that have been trained in UX, in automated testing, and in development. And I'm going to remove the work in progress limit. That looks better, right? That's a better way of working probably, right? So the truth of the matter is though that no one is good at full stack. Or I mean no one gets out of school by knowing all these different skills that you need to be a full stack engineer. But what you can do is limit the work in progress to create slack time to make sure that developers move towards the idea of being a full stack developer. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, does it? Everybody okay with it so far? Great. So that's the whole point, right? Taylor was like, okay, let's segregate the jobs to create local optimums. But it turns out that these local optimums, the cost of those local optimums are the efficiency of the global team. And it's the same with, the other idea is that you have like, the product team that kind of works on their own, and they design the software on their own, and then they, because they don't want to bother the developers. And then they send them by email the specifications, right? But really what you want to do is you want to create shared understanding. So you want to have developers in those meetings because they know more about the technical realities of the product that you're building. And so they'll have ideas too about, and then you play games like, oh, what if this happens? Oh, we should do this. Oh, what if that happens? We should do this. But you need to be more than one person in the room to do that. And generally having a diverse set of people is better. Okay, so this is the last point I wanted to make. The other big mistake that I see is in the recruitment process. So what ends up happening a lot is people hire their first developer, and they're too busy to train them, and then a year later, they realize that their developer is no good. And so they're like, okay, so we need to improve the process or make the process more complex. We need to Googleify our recruitment process to make sure that we don't end up with bad people. And there is no recruiting process that will avoid you from hiring people that just don't fit your team. It just doesn't exist. Google's actually proven that. There's absolutely no correlation between top performers at Google and the people that do the best on the entrance exams for Google. No correlation. The only correlation they were able to find was the people that did bad on the tests And Google were like, we should probably still hire this guy. Those guys end up being top performers. And the people that do well on the tests are not top performers at Google, which is fascinating. Why do they continue to do it then? No one knows. They need to have a process because everybody wants to work for Google, so they need to have a process. The thing is, you at your startup, you don't have to have the same process that Google does. What I look for when I hire is people that I like, people that I am impressed with who they are as people. I don't really care about their skills. And the other thing is, people always talk about, oh, devs leave their jobs every 18 months, it's normal, developers are like that. That's not true. If you create a company, every time somebody leaves your company, that should be a warning sign for you. Oh, but he wanted to go live by the ocean. No. There's always more to it than that. The point is that you should always be asking yourself why people are leaving. And people are always talking about recruiting. But really, if nobody leaves your company, you don't need to recruit. So just make sure people stay. The cost of engineers leaving your company are very, very, very high. They're high on morale, they're high, you have to recruit again, the new people have to be trained, etc. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, I guess we're good. Well, thank you very much for listening, and
Thank you.
have a good one.